We've had 4 rounds so far in the 2016 Donaldson Cross Country Championship, and if you live in Gauteng, the races have covered 3 points on the compass. Westwards for both the RFS Endurance and Lichtenberg 450, south for the Friedevoort Super Sprint, and north for the Desert Race. So it was about time to head to the east, and that's exactly what we did for round 5, the Nkomazi 450 in the low-veld town of Malalan. It's been a year of close battles, especially in the Class T of the production vehicle category. But then that's what you'd expect from one of South Africa's most exciting forms of motor racing. It all started in the northwest town of Vryburg, with the RFS Endurance getting the season underway on April Fool's Day. Next came the short, sharp Friedevoort Super Sprint, which was followed by the big one, the Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race. The Lichtenberg 450 signalled the midpoint of the season, and the second half of the season started with a bang in the low-veld with the Nkomazi 450. This race has been crowned as the best event of the season in the past and is a firm crowd favourite. As before, this year's DSP was based at the Riverview Prep School, just to the west of the town centre. It played host not only to the service park, race HQ and the start-finish, but also to the legendary after-party that marks the end of each Nkomazi 450. But before we got to the Obskop, there was the small matter of round 5 of the Donaldson Championship to tackle. Sponsored by Malalan Toyota, the Nkomazi 450 is also the home race for brothers Johan and Werner Horn, who campaigned the Malalan Toyota Hilux in Class T of the championship. The brothers have shown impressive pace in the past, notching up an overall win at Sun City 2 years ago. But so far this season has been unkind to them, and they were hoping for a turnaround in their backyard.
We're in Malalan, round 5, our home event. We had a tough season so far, so hopefully our hometown can bring us some luck.
Realistically, however, the Horn brothers were well out of the 2016 title fight. That battle was raging between the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux of Jason Fenter with navigator Vince van Alleman and the NWM Racing Ford Ranger of Chris Visser and navigator Ward Huxtable. Midway through the season, just a couple of points separated the two, but at the Lichtenberg 450 it was Fenter who triumphed, extending the championship lead.
Most definitely they will be coming hard at us, but I think it's going to be a tight race and it's going to be some good times, yes.
But Visser is a very experienced racer and was certainly not about to give up the chase for overall honours. His plan for Malalan? Flat out. Another crew with pace and bad luck this year is that of Redline Motorsports' Johan van Staden and Navi Mike Lawrenson, and things weren't looking good for them in Malalan from the get-go, as van Staden was ill when he arrived. Mike Lawrenson caught us up with their plans.
Yeah, we've had a bit of bad luck this season. We've had things happen that are totally unexpected.
Luke Butte and Andre Vermeulen found themselves on the podium twice in as many races and had every reason to be upbeat about their chances on the Nkomazi 450.
And we had a very clear strategy from the beginning of the season. That was just to go consistent, go clean. This is our first year in Class T together.
Butte's recent good form hasn't been quite enough to propel him into the top 3 yet. As it stood before the Nkomazi 450, it was Fenter and Van Alleman who topped the charts, with 117 points lead ahead of Chris Visser and Ward Huxtable. Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson were in third, 52 points behind the leaders, with a lot of work to do. Class T isn't the only production vehicle category in town, however, and the battle in Class S for vehicles with engines up to 4 litres in capacity has gained new momentum, thanks to some enthusiastic racing from brothers Otto and Ronnie Graven. It was former champions Jannie Visser and Navi, Chris Visser Jr., who triumphed in Lichtenberg after pipping 4x4 Megaworld's Heini Stumper and Henry Hugo to the post. But neither of these crews were on the starting list for the Nkomazi 450, and if ever there was a chance for one of the Gravens to step up and steal a march on the points table, this was it. With that said, Redline Motorsports' Terence Marsh decided to join the fray in Class S for the Nkomazi 450, since his regular vehicle would now be in the hands of Jappie van der Kerk, partnered by multiple former champion Navi, Rob Houghton. Van der Kerk is an experienced rally driver and was in Malalan to sample cross-country racing. This meant that Marsh and celebrity driver Clubio and Boyo Arnold would campaign in Class S, and the bubbly lady was all fired up, ready for the race.
There's something about the energy of motocross individuals. They're so approachable, they're so acceptable, they're so embracing, they're so welcoming into their world. I'm an extreme sports athlete, so I love the rough, the tough, the uncomfortable.
When it comes to outright pace, however, there can be no doubt of the dominance of the Class FIA vehicles. These mighty machines are built to FIA specs and feature independent rear suspension, big V8 engines, race tyres, together with other, more technical fun goodies. Bottom line, they live on their own planet, where defending champions Leroy Poulter and Navi Rob Howie usually set the pace in their Toyota Gazoo racing SA Hilux. They have teammates Anthony Taylor and Dennis Murphy right behind them in the championship, and the expectation was for the two Toyota crews to continue their winning ways on the Nkomazi 450. Two classes make up the special vehicle category in the Donaldson Cross Country Championship. In Class P for specials with engines up to 4 litres in capacity, it was the name of John Thompson that topped the standings, thanks to some inspired driving throughout the 2016 season. Together with navigator Marisa Matten, Thompson has shown good pace and consistency, and it would be silly to bet against him taking the championship at this point. But while Thompson is sitting pretty at the top of the table, things aren't nearly as comfortable for the Class A championship leader, Evan Hutchison. Hutch, who campaigns the spectacular motorite racing bat with Navi Donnie Stassen, had a shaky start to the season. Things settled down midway through the championship, however, and going into the Nkomazi 450, he was back in control.
It's definitely not going to be easy. We are back in the lead of the championship, I think it's by 2 points.
Hutchison's biggest challenge for the moment comes from Aussie Dave McShane, who races in the Fox Racing Porter. For the Nkomazi 450, McShane was partnered by Alvin Kutsia, who can usually be found sitting next to Leroy Poulter in a Class S2000 rally car. Despite the change of Navi, McShane was still looking forward to the race and full of compliments for the area.
From what I've seen so far of Malalan, it's an absolutely beautiful place, so I'm looking forward to racing here.
Beyond the pairing of Hutchison and McShane, several other crews were still set to tackle the Nkomazi 450. Former competitor Shamir Variawa made a welcome return to the sport when he lined up in the ex-Jimmy Zahos Striker. Missing from the grid, however, after his crash in Lichtenberg was Big Sorrel van Biljoen, whose navigator, Philip Herselman, now joined Gary Berthold in the Atlas Copco Amarok for the race. The father and daughter pairing of Kutsia and Sandra Labiskakni were also back in action and looking forward to another solid performance after their career best third-place finish in round 4. Prologue day dawned bright and clear in Malalan, and it was immediately apparent that summer had arrived early in the Lowveld. The Nkomazi 450 followed the established format in terms of race distance, with a qualifying race of 100 kilometers, followed by 2 race loops of 156 kilometers each. For this round, however, the organisers changed the timing format to allow for dust gaps throughout the event, making the route safer and the racing closer than ever before. By mid-morning, the DSP at the Riverview Prep School was a hive of revving engines and strutting egos, as the crews prepared to take on the first part of what turned out to be an epic race. So join us after the break as we look at all the racing action from Malalan. Welcome back to the Nkomazi 450 in Malalan, where it was the 2 Class FIA Toyota Hiluxes of Poulter and Taylor who set off first. The two big black and red machines were absolutely spectacular around the qualifying loop, where Poulter and Navi Howie went off first. The pair looked like they would easily take the win in the qualifying race, but a puncher saw them drop behind teammates Taylor and Murphy, who recorded their second pole position of the 2016 season.
Yeah, tomorrow you're going to be racing on corrected time, so it's going to be quite interesting to see what happens.
After a gap of 20 minutes, it was time for the Class T and Class S competitors to take on the qualifying race. With Visser and Venter embroiled in a massive battle for overall supremacy, qualifying became a crucial part of the Nkomazi 450. At the same time, Gary Berthold and new Navi Philip Herseman would be in the spotlight, with Berthold has shown a lot of pace, but struggled to settle down with a regular Navi. The Horn brothers would share the spotlight as well, thanks to the fact that this was their home race. Jappie van der Kerk and Robin Houghton would also be a crew to watch, since van der Kerk was new to the sport. Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson would be under scrutiny to see if they could finally change their luck. At the same time, BMW X3 driver Henny de Klerk and navigator Adrian Roots would be a crew to watch, since they've shown great pace throughout the season, but failed so far to turn that pace into points. And let's not forget Luke Burton and Andre Vermeulen, who found themselves on the podium twice in the last two races. That's just Class T. The Class S battle would mainly be between the Graven brothers, each driving a Toyota Hilux, and Terence Marsh in the Redline Motorsport in Nissan Navara. As the crews left the DSP to take on the 100-kilometer loop, there was certainly more than enough action to watch. Out on this spectacular route, it turned out to be a prologue punctuated by punctures. The crews who had the fewest problems qualified in the best positions. Simple as that. Otto Graven placed the Graven Motorsport Hilux on pole in Class S, whilst brother Ronnie failed to complete the loop after his Hilux engine gave up the ghost early in the loop.
We did a lot of hard work to get the cars up and well, that's the competitive, but yeah, awesome.
Class T saw plenty of drama as Henny de Klerk's bad luck continued. As a matter of fact, some people said that if it wasn't for bad luck, de Klerk would have no luck at all. He was leading the field at one point and looked set to qualify in pole position, but misjudging the depth of the water crossing near the end of the loop saw the X3 ingest water, putting de Klerk on the sidelines for the main race.
Yeah, so we stalled the engine, and now we'll have to see if we can fix it overnight and to see if we can, start at the back tomorrow morning.
Guerta and Vermeulen were another crew that stumbled in qualifying. They had two tyres delaminate during the 100-kilometer section and lost nearly 10 minutes as a result. Van der Kerk suffered a power steering failure on his Redline Motorsport Nissan Navara about 55 kilometers into the loop. Sadly, it forced him to retire, but he'd be back for race day.
Yeah, unfortunately there's a nut that came loose on the one of the oil lines of the power steering. We stopped to tighten it again, but unfortunately we lost so much oil that we couldn't get the power steering to work again.
For the rest, it was pretty much a puncher per production vehicle. Gareth Woolridge, Chris Visser, Leroy Poulter and Gary Berthold all had to change tyres along the way, with Berthold losing more time when he had to find the correct route. But maybe the biggest loser in terms of the championship was Jason Venter and Vince van Alleman, who suffered two punches and qualified as only the 5th fastest in Class T. He now had both the NWM Ford ahead of him, as well as the Redline Motorsport Nissan Navara of Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson, who recorded a clean run through the tricky loop. But qualifying was all about the local lads, Johan and Werner Horn, who placed their Malalan Toyota Hilux on pole position on their home event. The pair had no problems on the route and had every reason to be upbeat about their performance.
Yeah, I think we had the luck on our side. We tried to manage not to get punches today, and it paid off.
And here it is, confirmation of the Horns' pole position in Class T, with Van Staden and Lawrenson in 2nd. Woolridge and Dreyer in 3rd, Visser and Huxtable recorded the 4th fastest time, and Venter and Van Alleman clearly had a lot of work to do in the main race. Class FIA was an all-Toyota affair, with Anthony Taylor and Dennis Murphy recording another pole position, whilst Otto Graven and Bobby Bruce stamped their authority on the Class S field. With qualifying done and dusted, it was time for the main event. Two tough loops of 156 kilometers each, traversing sugarcane fields, mountain sections, and a number of high-speed tracks strewn with rocks. Steering clear of those rocks would be the name of the game, but at the same time, nobody could really afford to hang around. 4x4 Mega World's Jason Fenter was only too aware of what lay ahead of him, especially given his championship aspirations.
So today we'll just keep calm and come through the field from behind.
And then there was Klubi and Boyo Arnold, who was looking forward to the Nkomazi 450 main race with more than just a little enthusiasm.
Today is a new day. I'm a positive person. I've got positive energy. We still have the goals and the visions that we set out here to do.
The day was warm and clear, and the spectators arrived in their droves, ready for the action that was about to be unleashed on the Lowveld. At 8:30 on Saturday morning, August the 27th, the checkers dropped and the red mist descended, and they were off. Leading the charge was Anthony Taylor and Dennis Murphy in their Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux. The pair held their own at the head of the field, and even though teammates Poulter and Howie closed the gap, Taylor was still looking good for a second place finish at the midpoint. However, a problem with the cooling on the Hilux's power steering system brought the big machine to a premature halt, and Taylor and Murphy had no choice but to watch from the sidelines as defending champs Poulter and Howie completed the race, making it 5 wins from 5 starts in 2016. For Poulter, the Nkomazi 450 couldn't have gone any better, except maybe if he had also won the prologue, of course.
The Hilux today was magic. It's hard terrain and a lot of rocky, as we said earlier, and we got out of it with 1 puncture.
In the Class S race, Otto Graven and Bobby Brewis showed their true colours when they recorded a clean first loop in their Graven Motorsport Toyota Hilux. The pair showed a clean pair of heels to Marsh and Klubi and Boyo Arnold in the Redline Motorsport Nissan Navara, and were 8 minutes up at the midway point. Sadly, Marsh had to retire the Nissan after the first loop, effectively handing Graven and Brewis an easy victory, though they certainly worked hard enough to achieve it regardless.
Like I said before, we did so much work on the car, so much development, and it's starting to shine through now.
But the bulk of the battle lay in Class T, the premier South African spec class of cross-country racing. Remember, Venter and Van Alleman were in the hunt for maximum championship points, but the pair started down in 5th place after a tough qualifying session. If anything, their goal was to stay ahead of NWM's Visser and Huxtable, their only real challengers for the championship title. Fortunately for Venter, Visser's race didn't quite go to plan. The Ford crew suffered 2 punches on their Ranger in the first loop and struggled to change the tyre due to damage on the jack point. They suffered 1 more puncture on loop 2 and were clearly not going to score maximum points.
Yeah, the terrain was quite interesting and was quite tricky, quite technical, yeah.
This meant that Venter achieved his goal of scoring more points than Visser when he finished in 4th place on the race. Maybe not quite the victory he was initially hoping for, but at least it was mission accomplished.
We did what we came here for, to finish before Chris, so we pushed our lead in the championship a bit more.
For Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer, the Nkomazi 450 was their first race back after the devastating fire that gutted the NWM workshop recently in Maritzburg. Their technical crew worked around the clock to get the car ready, and the race crew also delivered the goods. They had a clean run on race day and posted the 3rd fastest time overall.
I think it was a very good event. Obviously, I wanted to do a little bit better, but I'm very content with 3rd on our comeback.
Things went considerably less smoothly for Luke Burton and Andre Vermeulen in their Redline Motorsport force-fueled Nissan Navara. The pair had shown good form lately and were enjoying their outing in the Nkomazi 450 until this happened. The crew were unhurt in the incident and managed to get the vehicle back onto its wheels. They completed the race, but certainly didn't feature on the podium as they had done in the last 2 rounds. But what about the crews who were gunning for the class honours? After qualifying, it was clear the Horn brothers were looking better than ever, but they had Van Staden and Lawrenson not far behind them. Both crews reported clean runs on the opening loop, and Johan Horn was cautiously optimistic at the midway marker.
Yeah, just to save the tyres. That's a big thing. So that's the plan for the next loop, is just to take it slow and get to the finish.
Van Staden, on the other hand, was keen to push on for a victory and maybe joining the fight for the championship yet again.
I think it's going to be up to clean run and push a little bit harder, about 5% harder than what we're doing, to try and regain a little bit of time lost.
As it turned out, both crews had clean runs on Loop 2. Both went quicker on the second run, and both were looking strong for the win. As a matter of fact, Van Staden went fastest of all Class T crews on Loop 2, pipping the Horns by 1 minute and 22 seconds. But the Horns were 4 minutes quicker on the opening loop, ensuring a hometown win for the Toyota Hilux crew.
Yeah, I think our home event brought us some luck this time. It was a hard day.
Still, it was a well-deserved second place for Van Staden, and there should be more from where that came from. So that's how some of the key players fared in the production category. Join us after the break for all the highlights from the special vehicle category at the Nkomazi 450, round 5 of the 2016 Donaldson Cross Country Championship.
On this episode of Limo Wars Las Vegas, a sexy night turns ugly.
There's a cop next to us.
When rowdy clients get out of hand.
I'm gonna brake check your ass.
Don't tell me what to do, just drive. You, I'm over it. You're the boss.
This is Limo Wars Las Vegas.
Here's your chance to set a world record. Kia Motors South Africa is looking for hundreds of drivers to test drive the 2017 Sportage in a record-setting relay around South Africa. It's the world's longest test drive. Go to kiaworldrecord.co.za to register, and you won't just be a part of history. You'll also stand a chance of winning a new Kia Sportage. Kia, the power to surprise. T's and C's apply.
Welcome back to Donaldson Cross Country Motor Racing at its very best and the action-packed Nkomazi 450 in the town of Malalon. As you've probably gathered by now, the conditions on the roads that made up the route were testing for both man and machine. The brave men and women of the special vehicle category were also about to find out. Defending champions Evan Hutchison and Donnie Stassen were the first to venture off into the unknown in their motorized racing bat. And exactly 3 minutes later, Aussie Dave McShane dropped the hammer, with rally champion navigator Alvin Kutsia doing the co-driving duties inside their team Fox Porter. Father and daughter Kutsia and Sandra Labaskachny were up next in the 4x4 Mega World Porter, ahead of a bunch of Class P Zarkos, driven by John Thompson and Marisa Matten, the SA Clinics version of Nick Gosler and Andrew Massey, and the Puma Fuels number 24 of Andrew McInerney and Victor Njeki. And a very welcome return to former South African champion driver Shamir Variawa and Zahir Borania, who acquired the ex-Jimmy Zahos Cobalt Striker, but Variawa's return was short-lived as he was forced to retire with power steering problems. Hutchison's qualifying race almost went south when the motorized bat picked up a puncher just 6 kilometres into the loop. But the crew managed to change the flat tyre and went on to record yet another qualifying race victory. Aussie driver Dave McShane and co-driver Alvin Kutsia weren't so lucky. They also picked up a flat at the 40-kilometre mark, lost more time when the wheel got stuck, and then suffered major electrical damage at a river crossing near the end of the loop. With all things considered, he was lucky to survive the qualifying race and still set the third fastest time in the process. This meant that the Class P Zarko of John Thompson and Marisa Matten came through to claim second position overall in another display of both fast and consistent driving. Kutsia Labaskachny and his daughter Sandra regarded themselves as lucky to reach the end of the tough qualifying race after also picking up a flat tyre, then suffering brake issues in the 4x4 Mega World Porter. When the scores were tallied, this is how it panned out for the qualifying race in the special vehicles. Evan Hutchison took pole position once again ahead of Dave McShane and Kutsia Labaskachny. And then in the Class Ps, John Thompson reigned supreme ahead of Nick Gosler and his co-driver Andrew Massey. Day 2 of the Nkomazi 450 in Malalon dawned bright and early, and the thermostat showed that the racing wouldn't be the only thing hot in the low veld, as the special vehicle crews lined up for the flag drop. As the man who set the pace during Friday's qualifying race, Evan Hutchison and Donnie Stassen were the first ones to drop the hammer inside the motorized bat. Unlike on other events, the race format here in Malalon allowed for 2 minutes for the dust gap between each competitor. So it took a few minutes before John Thompson and Marisa Matten set off their quest to complete the more than 300 kilometres of tough tracks that were on the cards for race day. The Nkomazi 450 would have been the first taste of the beautiful Mpumalanga scenery for Dave McShane. But the Aussie had no chance to admire the scenery as he had to make up time lost in his disastrous qualifying race the day before. And the same could be said for Kutsia and Sandra Labuskaki in the 4x4 Mega World Porter, who went off next. Ed Gosler and co-driver Andrew Massey survived the tough qualifying race the day before, but the SA Clinic Zarko sadly didn't make it back to the designated service park after the first loop. Gosler, however, wasn't the only one, as the tough route of the Nkomazi 450 also claimed the Puma Fuels version of Andrew Makinetti and Victor Nsheki. Their demise did open the road for former SA champions Shamir Variawa and Navi Zahia Borania to make up lost ground. The pair failed to complete the qualifying race and started at the back of the pack on race day, but Variawa slowly got back into it and started to show good pace behind the wheel of the Cobalt Striker. At the front of the field, however, it was Hutchison and Starson who reached the relative safety of the DSP after the first 150-kilometre loop. They did it in a time of 2 hours and 20 minutes. Hutchison was fast, but not fast enough, as McShane and Kutsia managed to break under the 2 hours 20-minute marker. But the crew was slow in leaving the 20-minute service break and were handed a 4-minute penalty as a result that saw their names tumble down the leaderboard. This allowed the 4x4 Mega World Porter of the Labuskaknis to gain a position with one loop to go, so the race was now on. And as always, John Thompson did what he does best, and that was to safely navigate his way past and over every obstacle that the tough route could throw to him. Thompson and Zamatin reached the halfway stop well in command of Class P, as well as running second in the special vehicles.
Yeah, it was a tough one, but we had a good one, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'll definitely come back again.
These crews may have completed a very tough Loop 1 of the Nkomazi 450, but another loop of the same route still remained, which meant another 150 kilometers of churned up dirt roads with rocks just waiting to take a bite out of each race car. The Nkomazi 450 was most certainly not the comeback that Shamir Variawa wanted after returning to the sport. The former champion was plagued with all sorts of problems, but showed good pace when things went well, sending out a clear message to his fellow competitors in the process. The battle for podium positions raged on between the Team Fox Porter of Dave McShane and Alvin Kutsia and the red 4x4 Mega World version of the Labuskaknis. Out on the road, it was advantage to the Aussie as McShane got the better of them, but the 4-minute penalty received earlier in the day meant he was behind coming into the home stretch. McShane gave it his all, but in the end, Labuskakni did just enough to fend off the Aussie. A mere 2 seconds was all that separated them at the end, third overall for Labuskakni and fourth for the Australian. This meant one thing. It's nothing new for John Thompson and Maurice Zamatin to win Class P of the special vehicle category, but this time around, the Lesotho-based driver was on course for probably a career-best second position overall. The Class P victory was already in the bag, and after another 2 hours and 25 minutes of racing, the Zarko crossed the flying finish for a fantastic second overall. So the race was Hutchison and Starson's to lose, and they very nearly did that. The pair tried their very best not to win, and nearly succeeded thanks to running the last 75 kilometers of the race with no brakes. When they stopped to change a flat tire, the spare wheel also turned out to be flat. Fortunately, they carried a second spare, but was forced to drive very cautiously as they were fresh out of rubber. Having said all of that, Hutchison and Stassen crossed the finish line for yet another emphatic victory and their first in Malalan. Here it is, proof of Hutchison's hard-earned victory in the special vehicle category, ahead of the Labuskaknis and Australian Dave McShane. In the Class Ps, it was Thompson and Zamatin that took yet another victory. And this was the reward, the sweet taste of victory champagne for the winner's podium. It was Thompson who sprayed it from the top step in the Class Ps. And they so very nearly didn't make it back, but Hutchison hung on to record another victory in his long and successful career.
We just kept on going. We had lost brakes and all sorts of problems. I said, let's just keep going. And yeah, it turned out to be a good day.
Over on the production vehicle podium, it was the first taste of success for the men from Kimberley. A maiden Class S victory for Otto Graven and Navi Bobby Brewis. And a very popular victory for Malalan Toyota and the local lads, Johan and Werner Horn, in the very hotly contested Class Ts. But the men who made it all look way too easy were none other than champions Leroy Poulter and Robbie Howie, who remain unbeaten in 2016. Cross-country racing returns to the Northwest, and more specifically to Sun City, for the penultimate round of the 2016 championship. We'll see you there on Friday, the 30th of September. All the spectacular action from the Nkomazi 450 was brought to you by Donaldson, in association with Force Fuel, Ford, Toyota and Tyre Wrap.